Here we go. So we have Josh Diaz tonight with us live, and he runs a Bigfoot. I'm going to say Bigfoot. Just a natural reaction. He runs the YouTube channel, The Lab, and it's a true crime channel. And I'll let you take it from here, Josh, because I know you also have a podcast.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Josh Diaz, and I run the channel, The Lab. I narrate, give commentary, and I just talk about true crime. Some stories are more well known than others, and The Lab is recently new. Like within the last 4 or 5 months, I've formed it into an actual channel that is dedicated to true crime. And because I have a passion for true crime. I also have a podcast called the No Big Deal Podcast, which is it's more of a comedy show where, you know, things aren't taken as serious, and it's me and a couple buddies, and that's how the podcasting started many years. Well, I say many, like 6.5 or so.
That's a long time in the podcast world.
Yeah. And
really is.
I've always been into broadcasting. I've always been into some sort of, you know, media entertainment. I grew up on Howard Stern, Don Imus, Rush Limbaugh, all those guys. Art Bell. I'm sure you're familiar with Art Bell.
We all are.
So yeah, that's how I got into this, and I've just had a passion for mainly true crime, but also more of the true crime aspect of false narratives and things like that you would think are gospel until you look into it. And
that's your niche. That's what attracted me to your channel.
Yeah, I've made a lot of good friends, and I've made a lot of bad enemies. And you know, I've from one thing to the look. I've had people threaten to kill me. I've had people threaten to people have asked for my address, you know, and things like that. And I don't engage in those kind of things, but I don't mean when I tell stories and the way that I do, I don't intend to step on people's toes of what they believe, but I try to deal in facts, and sometimes those facts aren't always the most popular public perception,
because they've been hand fed a different set of facts by things like documentaries and stuff.
Yeah, so you know, you just like and I don't know what you want to talk about first. If you want to talk about Madeleine McCann, or if you want to talk about the West Memphis 3, but you know, they're two separate cases, because there's when you come to Maddie McCann, it's very it's still ongoing, and there has been some finality to what is it, the West Memphis 3. You know, they're out now, served 18 years in prison, but there was just a really false narrative that was portrayed when it came to the West Memphis 3. And a good friend of mine named Gary Meese, he's an author of 3 books on the West Memphis 3. One is Blood on Black. The other one's called Where the Monsters Go, and then he compiled both books into one, where it's a condensed version called The Case Against the West Memphis 3. And the detail is outstanding. His attention to detail is second to none, and tells the totality of the story the way that, you know, it should be told.
Now, I've heard your interviews with him. Now, what are his credentials? Is he like a private investigator, or just Like,
Gary Meese is he's obviously an author, but he was chief editor. He was actually lived in West Memphis while the trials were going on. He was the chief editor at the West Memphis Times, and so he was on the ground, and he spent many years working on this book because he also felt like there was a narrative being told that wasn't proper. And when as obviously he caught a lot of flack, but he just deals in facts. He deals in and look, in a lot of these things there are a lot of like hearsay and speculation and circumstantial evidence. There's no question about that, and all that's totally fine. But the fact is there's incriminating evidence, there's damning evidence, there's things that can and can't be explained, and that's the case of the West Memphis 3. And I mean, I could get into that story. Yeah. Or we could talk about Maddie, whatever you want to talk about.
Well, the West Memphis 3, man, I could talk for 3 hours on that. Bojangles and that guy, and I mean, there's so much stuff I want to talk about. But since I have marketed this live stream as the Madeleine McCann,
sure,
we better start there now.
Yeah.
Maybe some people that are watching my channel that are just Bigfoot fans aren't maybe true crime fans, and they might not be aware of the whole Madeleine McCann disappearance, abduction, whatever you want to call it. So do you want to do a brief rundown on what happened with Madeleine McCann?
Yeah. So here, hold on. Sorry about that.
Hi, John.
Maddie McCann was a 3-year-old girl that was on vacation with her parents in Portugal. They were staying at what was like a resort type compound near the beach, beautiful place. And there were 3 children in the cottage, or whatever, the bungalow or whatever they were staying in. And the parents went to dinner. They left their 3 children alone with the door unlocked, and they wanted to eat close to the hotel. However, when the mother went back to check on them, Maddie was gone. And from that point on, basically all hell broke loose. This little girl goes missing, and there's a significant amount of blunders and misinformation. I believe this is back in 2007, and here we are. I believe she would have just turned 18 years old, and there's still no finality to the case. But I actually think that there is now. In my opinion, the case is basically solved.
Okay, well, let's go back to the start though before we get to the finality thing. Let's go through all of the stuff that all of the weeds, and like I've listened to so much about this stuff, but I know you think there's finality to it. But I want to go back to the night, and even before that, and what happened, and who the parents were, and public perception, and suspects, and all of that stuff leading up to it, because the new revelations are like what, a year, maybe 18 months old.
Yeah, right around there. However, I mean, there's something that's come up in the last 24 hours that
really.
Yeah, and it's significant stuff, but lot of people believe that the parents were involved. I believe you said that you think that, or thought that, or think that. And that's how investigators work. They work from the inside out.
Right.
And in my personal opinion, there hasn't been a lot of good suspects in this case. There's been wild accusations, and they go after one child predator after the other, which is what you would want to do in this case. The parents that they look at the parents, and to me, if the parents are guilty of anything, they are guilty of negligence. They were both doctors, very well to do, 3 kids, and they just made the biggest mistake of their life. I don't understand how you would leave the door open, unlocked in a very active place.
Right.
By the way, there were also babysitters available.
Yeah. Right.
The compound that they were at, the resort had babysitters, and so it would have been nothing for them to hire a babysitter to sit with them. I mean, they're on vacation at this beautiful resort. They're both doctors. They have money. They're not trying to save money. And the judgment of the parents will forever, and I'm sure that, they just kick themselves for it. But I don't subscribe to the idea that something happened with the 3 kids and Maddie died and they covered it up. There's just other than, rumors and stuff like that, there's very little to suggest that anything like that happened.
Well, okay. So we have the night, what the parents are, you call them the Tapas 7, right?
Yeah.
There's 9 altogether, including McCann. So you've got the Tapas 7. And they're all like well-to-do doctors and stuff, and they're going on vacation, and they go to this place. What the hell do you call the town again? Deluge, Prior Deluge, and they go there. So instead of hiring a babysitter, what they actually end up doing is they eat at the Tapas restaurant, which is about, I think they say it's 100 meters away, which is about 300 feet. But it's kind of a bit of a pain in the ass to get to. So what all of the parents and the Tapas 7 decide to do, instead of bringing the kids with them, is they leave the kids unattended with the doors unlocked, and then they all take turns, like every 20 minutes, and they all go on and check on the kids. And there's this whole thing about when I think David Payne, that guy wears me out. There's a few stories about him, but a few different people go into the room, and they go into the condo, the bedroom that Maddie's in. She's in the bedroom with the twins that they have as well. They're like 18 months or something, and she's 3 years old. And a couple of them mentioned that the door was ajar, and then it was more ajar, and then it was in different positions. But then there's so much stuff, and I don't even know where to start. I mean, they did have a babysitting service, but the day before, apparently, they had some woman that was renting upstairs said that she heard Madeleine crying for like an hour and a half the night before.
Yeah. I mean, that's what somebody has, asserted, and who knows? Like, did she actually time that? I mean, okay. A lot of these things, when these, first of all, the crime scene was tainted, right, from just dragging every single person in and through there. I mean, it's the classic same, circumstance with Amanda Knox. They didn't secure the crime scene. Right. But once again, the problem with this is that these people, the authorities they're not really prepared for this kind of stuff.
Right.
They're not seasoned in it. and they're almost like security guards that were coming into that house. I mean, they weren't very well trained, and no fault of their own.
Right.
You know, I mean, they're just doing their job, but they're contaminating this crime scene. And
they're the FBI.
yeah, and you know, I've peeked into some of the other possible suspects, and there's been so many leads and so many sightings and so many this and that, and which is completely typical with a missing persons case. Problem is that this is probably the biggest missing person case of the last half century.
Oh, for sure. In history. I mean, what about the English guy? What's his name?
Yeah, you know,
the first suspect, but he did have some kind of sexual predator past in England, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and honestly, and I hate to even say it this way, but compared to the suspect that I'm going to talk about, okay. He's a relative Boy Scout, and none of their suspects that they had or person of interest, none of them panned out ever. Everything, you know, would fall to the wayside when push came to shove. I mean, you got to prove it. You just got to prove it.
What was his name? Sorry, Josh. We got to bring it. That's very important. He was an English guy. He was half Portuguese. And he inserted himself into the crime scene because he was kind of an interpreter, and oh my God, what's his name? I'm trying to find it, but all I'm getting is your guy.
Yeah, I'm looking here. Yeah, I really can't remember his name. He was quite a suspect quite a long time ago.
And he sued, I think, the BBC for a lot of money. And he lived with his mother very close to the scene. And Jane Tanner they all said that they saw him like lurking around the complex, and they basically fingered him from the get-go. I mean, she was they drove her up in an unmarked police vehicle with tinted windows, and she pointed them out.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing that we can definitely get into, is because there could have been people that were tipping other people off, you know, a pedophile type ring, or not even that, a criminal ring, because, you know, those beach properties and stuff like that, they get ransacked on a regular basis. You know, there's people are always out trying to commit crimes in those places, because a lot of the times people don't just sit in their, you know, their condos all day.
Okay, Robert Murat.
Okay, yeah, Robert. Yeah,
he was the first guy to be named in this case.
Yeah,
but we also had even Freud's grandson was apparently a pedophile also, and the Podestas had visited him or something at some point. So he was a suspect also, if you want to get into conspiracy theories. But the Podesta, a lot of the real deep conspiracy people think that the Podestas has something to do with it, because they were in the area at the time. But I think that's all BS. But
yeah, I mean, that goes back to the Pizzagate stuff,
right?
And it's just, once again, conspiracies are one thing, facts and evidence are another, and most of the time when people are giving you their personal opinion, it's usually biased. Like the Podestas. What's the likelihood of that? You know, I mean, you got to deal in reality here, and the problem is, there is to me, and I'm no private investigator, I'm no anything, but I do my due diligence. Um, there's only one good suspect in the Madeleine McCann case, and he just, I'm convinced that it's him, and I can tell you why. I can, I'll give you a little background. I mean, I don't know how much you know about Christian Bruckner, or they called him Christian B. The German authorities refer to him as Christian B. Because he's well known in the German throughout the German judicial system. He's a pedophile. He's a woman abuser. He attacked older women. A 77-year-old woman he attacked. He raped her and beat her with a pipe. And when he filmed the whole thing.
Really?
And that was one of his calling cards. Okay. Another woman in Portugal was also abused. She was a younger one, and Christian Bruckner has no problem raping a old lady or a young child. Okay. His writings indicate that. But here's where it gets interesting about Christian Bruckner. Christian Bruckner was just a stone's throw away from the resort where he stayed. It was like 1.2 kilometers. Now, the German police say that they can put him at the scene of the crime through phone records and pinging that he received a phone call right about the time that the parents left for dinner, which indicates that somebody that he had friends, that somebody possibly tipped him off. He was looking to rob somebody because that's what he did. I mean, he was just kind of, he robbed people, he beat people, he sexually assaulted people. He was an all around monster. He is a monster. And they have the records that put him at the scene of the crime. And so the very next day when Maddie goes missing, he changes the registration on his car to his friend. And then he takes off out of the country. Okay. Whoa. So you got a guy who they can place at the scene of the crime, who has an incredible amount of history of being a sexual predator, who they later find out has a compound somewhere. It's in Germany, and it is this old rundown farm type building. Okay. They go search it. Let me go back here because I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself.
Yeah.
The problem is, here's another thing that happens. The German authorities want to talk to him about Maddie. So they send him a letter. The local police say, hey, why don't you come on by, talk to us about Maddie? This man owned it was like a little candy store right next to a kindergarten. He would give the kids lollies and chips and things like that. It's no coincidence that he was right next to a kindergarten. And he shows his friend this letter that the German police sent him, that they want to talk to him. He declines their invitation and takes off. So now he's on the run because he knows that the German police want to talk to him. They're not happy, or he's not happy about it. He shows a friend, tells them they want to talk to him about this. I'm out of here. So he takes off. And many, then what happens is that the 70-year-old or 77-year-old woman is abused. She lives, by the way. He doesn't kill her. She lives, and she's so ashamed to tell the story. Finally, she does. and they're after him. Well, they find a property in Germany under his name that he owns, and they end up finding over 8,000 pieces of child pornography. They find his own videos, which this was his undoing, were the videos. He has buried all of this stuff under his dead dog. Okay. So he digs a hole. He throws all the hard drives and USB sticks in the ground because he's leaving there. And
this is in Germany.
Yes, this is in Germany.
Okay.
And then they find a bunch of little kids' swimsuits, little girl swimsuits. And on his hard drive, he goes on to talk about how much of a joy it is to kidnap a little thing and use it for your own pleasure for a few days. He's very detailed about what he likes to do, and he tries to hide all that. Puts his I don't know if he killed the dog or if the dog died, but anyway, there was a dead dog, his dead dog, on top of that pile. Okay, and so the German police get a hold of this, right? And then they say, you know what? This is the top prosecutor in Germany, say, we have Christian Bruckner is now our number one suspect in the Madeleine McCann disappearance. And we believe she's dead. And we have strong evidence that she's dead. We don't have a body. We don't have any footprint, or not footprint. We don't have any body parts. We don't have a body or body parts. But what we do have is we do have evidence. We just can't tell you what it is at the moment because they're not in a huge hurry to throw a conviction at this guy because he's already in jail for previous crimes. Okay. So they ask him, hey, what do you know about Maddie? And his lawyer says, you have a better chance of ordering a glass of holy water in hell than my client talking or helping you guys with anything. And he goes, and it's not because he did anything wrong. Well, I mean, okay, I get it. It's not his job to prove he's innocent. It's on the prosecution. But if you're claiming you have nothing to do with it, I mean, a simple statement or an alibi or anything would clear you up, pretty quick. And I don't believe Christian Bruckner can do that. Now, about 8 years later from the Maddie situation, another little girl goes missing 2 hours from where he's living. His van is said to be leaving the scene of the crime, but they never found this girl either. And he was just right down the road. And so then he also assaults a 20-something-year-old woman. Well, she claims that it was him and that he videotaped the assault, which was very much on par for Christian Bruckner. And now you have Christian Bruckner facing other charges. One thing I found interesting was that he gets in trouble for rape. He's released by the German authorities. He gets in trouble again for assault and rape. Does some time, released again. And he was treated awfully well by the German authorities. For some reason, he had no supervision, no parole, no supervised parole office visits. He wasn't told to stay away from any kids. And I mean, he's just a lifelong criminal. And all of his girlfriends were very young. Okay. Like he had actual girlfriends that he dated, very young. All of them on the young side. Now, the Germans say they have strong evidence that Maddie's dead. The Germans say that that he is their number one suspect, and that they can put him at the scene of the crime. When asked what the evidence is that they have, they're not sane. Okay, because I guess they want to keep some stuff close to their chest. They have an ongoing active investigation, and in the last 23 hours, one of Christian's girlfriends, Christian Bruckner's ex-girlfriend's father, has went to the equivalent of the German, or the equivalent of our FBI. He goes to the German officials, and apparently he also has a compound in Portugal. He just disclosed this information, and they're getting ready to go on an all-out search of this compound. It's run down, it's fenced off, it's secluded, and they believe that there's a treasure trove of information there now, and this is literally within the last 18 hours.
Wow.
So there's huge developments in this case. The reason it moves so slow is because they have him in custody. There's no rush to throw a conviction on him at this moment. And they are actively building their case against Christian Bruckner. And now here's the thing. It's all well and good, but you got to prove it. And with the circumstantial evidence that they have right at the moment, I don't know if they can, but I'm under the impression, and this is speculation on my part, I'm under the impression that there's either photos or videos that they have that will conclude that Maddie is expired, that she's no longer here.
Wow.
But they won't disclose any of that until they put the charges against him, which I believe are coming. Like I said, they're just not in a hurry to do it. So you got a guy with a history of pedophilia and brutality getting a phone call right outside the condo of this Portugal, vacation house. And he flees the country, transfers the name of his vehicle's registration to his friends, and he's out of there. German police say, "Hey, we want to talk to you." Then he leaves again. Okay. Then they find that compound with little kid, with child pornography. They say a combined 8,000 pieces between video and pictures. And you have little kids' swimwear. All of this is buried under a dead dog. And now, like I said, fast forward 18 months to today, they're getting ready to search a new compound that he owned, a rundown piece of shit place that nobody wants to go because it's overgrown and it's fenced in and it's not easy to get to. And I believe, I don't know what they'll turn up about Maddie, but they'll turn up something about others. That is not the only victim. I believe he had something to do with the other girl. That was 8 years later. And so when you take the totality of everything, it's hard to imagine a scenario where Christian Bruckner isn't the man who did this. Now, I don't have irrefutable proof. I don't know if I would figure if the German authorities did, they would bring it out, or they could just be saving it to get an iron an ironclad conviction. They want that thing airtight. And because as far as I know about the German justice system, they're not loose-lipped with calling people suspects, main suspects. They're pretty, on point when it comes to them saying things like, we have a prime suspect. We think he did it. We think that we can prove it. We think, they're not saying anything's for certain, but they say that we think we can prove it. We think that, and they said within the last 2 years is when they came to the realization that Madeleine was no longer. So they found something, or they wouldn't say that.
Right.
What that something is, I don't know. I believe that it has something to do with that treasure trove of child pornography that they uncovered. But that's speculation on my part. The fact that they found little kids' bathing suits, the whole thing is nauseating, and he's a monster. And the reason that the parents were never charged with anything was basically just out of compassion because of the major mistake that was made. I mean, think of it this way, Cornell, and I think your audience would probably appreciate this. If you had $1 million in a suitcase and you went to dinner, would you leave your door unlocked and leave that $1 million alone?
Right.
What in the hell are we thinking here, people? And as my heart, as broken as my heart is for those parents, I can't help but always come back to the neglect factor. I mean, it seems like when the German authorities didn't keep him in prison, when the parents didn't lock the door, when they left them unattended, there's this catastrophic perfect storm of people letting Maddie McCann down. And that is the biggest tragedy of all. Preventable. Look, this was a crime of opportunity. I believe that Christian Breckner got a phone call saying that this bungalow's, or whatever it was called, a condo, is empty. He was going to rob it. He found some kids. Not unlike him, not something that he wouldn't do.
Do they have the person that called him? Do they have like his number, and do they have him in custody, or what's going on with that?
Well, they don't know. They don't know what was said on that phone, so they haven't. They've never released the person that called them, but it's not illegal to call somebody.
Right. They just have a phone call.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure that they've talked to him, and but their biggest piece of evidence that they've let the public know is that they can put him at the scene of the crime.
He was there. He was definitely there.
Oh, big time. I mean, he was scouring the streets, man. He was a petty thief, always looking to break into people's whatever crime he could get himself into. He was into it. But going back to the lady that was abused, she was 70 something years old. He beat her with a metal rod, raped her, and was taunting her, if you're going to live or if you're going to die. And that, coupled with his writings, him being right outside, I mean, I don't, they got to prove it, and I don't know if they can prove it, but they say that they can. They say that they will. And it's hard to imagine anybody else being responsible for this crime, in my opinion.
Well, that makes me think a whole lot different about it because I didn't know all that information.
Yeah.
Some of the things that trip me up is the dogs and all that kind of stuff, and the Tanner sighting and the Smith sighting, and it's so confusing sometimes because you have the Smiths come out like 5 months later and say that they saw, you know, the same thing as the Tanners saw. Were they just crazy, or why did they even come forward?
Yeah, it's kind of typical in all these kind of cases where there's sightings, there's people that want to insert themselves into the case for no good reason other than being nosy and not minding their business. And I think that's probably a lot of people like to cling on to. Look, you have people that confess to crimes that they didn't commit, and then it's proven by authorities, like the whole JonBenet Ramsey thing. You had several people say, "I'm the one that did it," and then they go, "Okay, well," then they go, "You were in another state. How, like things like that." So
yeah,
there's always somebody in these weird. People like attention. They like they just like to put themselves in the middle of something that's not their business, and maybe it's for good reasons, and maybe it's for maybe it's for just attention. It's really hard, but none of those leads, none of that stuff ever panned out to be anything.
But why would Jane Tanner insert herself into something that she could be incriminated by saying that there was some guy walking across, like 100 feet away from her when, Jerry and his friend were talking about tennis or whatever it was. That tripped me up too.
Is it possible that she did see something like that? Doesn't really prove anything other than she thinks that she saw somebody, and that is when you're confronted with something like that, and then you go, "Oh my God, you tend to overreact."
Do you think she might be kind of making it up just to not to get the spotlight away from the parents or something?
Nah, I think she probably thinks that she saw what she saw, and that it didn't really mean a whole lot. I mean, the parents were never actually suspects. It's one of I don't know if you ever seen the movie like Gone Girl or things like that, but everybody,
yeah.
It's one of those media driven things. Like, well, what do the parents know? The parents must know more than they're telling. Not necessarily. But what the parents did do was they absolutely failed their children, especially young Maddie. And if they're guilty of anything, it's neglect and a price that they'll pay for the rest of their lives. It's just one of those things. But like in the Casey Anthony case.
Oh, I hate that lady.
Yeah, she's a real gem. You had sightings all over the United States of this little girl. And all the while she was buried, or she was thrown in a swampy, area no more than a mile from her parents' house. And and then people are saying, "Oh, we saw her in Alaska, or we saw her in Arizona," and go, "Well, you might have saw somebody that looked like her." Just real funny. One time I knew a lady that called the FBI from my hometown because she thought Osama bin Laden was working at the convenience store. And man, I'm telling you, he was dead serious. Serious, man. And I'm going, oh my gosh, like what? But she was convinced. So people are odd. People, like you said, they want to be the hero. They want to be the one that cracks this case or cracks a case. And when it comes down to it, the only people, you have to work off credible evidence, and you have to present a case that makes sense. And I think that the case against Christian Bruckner makes a lot of sense.
Sounds like it. I didn't know all of that stuff. I hadn't really looked into it.
Yeah,
I thought it was just another red herring or something.
No, and so that's another thing. It's easy to get caught up with that kind of stuff too, because you hear so many things over so many years. Eventually you're going to go, oh, another one, or nothing's ever. There's never been a really, really solid suspect in the Madeleine McCann case until now, until the last year and a half, and it's intensifying by the hour. And no doubt that I don't know what kind of proof that they have, but I hope that it brings finality and that justice is served, and that people can kind of move on, because when you don't get any answers, that's what the parents just want to know, like, what happened. They just want to know, no matter how horrific it is. They deserve to know. And I think that we all deserve to have some. I say all of us. They owe us nothing, but the parents especially deserve to know what happened to their kid. And I don't know. I don't know. I hope that that's what happens. It's the whole Natalie Holloway thing. Like.
Oh yeah, that's another one.
It's very, very eerily similar. I mean, lady goes to Aruba on a class trip and vanishes. She's just gone off the face of the earth. And then you have all these lies, and you have all these stories, you have all these different perspectives, and some make sense and some don't. Most people believe Joran van der Sloot is the killer.
That was a Dutch guy, right? He was convicted. Is that true?
He was convicted of another murder.
Oh.
He killed a I think he killed a Peruvian girl. Killed her in his hotel room.
Now, she was on a cruise ship, or was she there on vacation? Because cruise ships have a higher rate of missing and killed people than general population.
Who, Natalie Holloway?
Right. Was she was on vacation, or was she just getting off a cruise ship?
She was on a senior trip class.
Oh, okay.
And no, they flew over there, and she the similarities between the case, that they're eerie. I mean, Joran was he was just a big liar. I don't know if he killed her on purpose. I don't know if he slipped her something to rape her. I don't know, but he had something to do with it. If not directly responsible, which I believe he did, but I don't know if he necessarily intentionally killed her. I don't know that. But it's possible, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the video where Joran is talking about, he's in a car with some guy, and he starts explaining what happened that night, and that she was drunk and on drugs, and that she basically just cashed out on him, and then he threw her in the ocean.
Really? No, I haven't seen that. I haven't really looked into that. I'd heard the case, and I've heard it on a podcast or something, but I never really looked into it. I thought that case was closed, and he was convicted.
No. he was arrested twice for it, but they didn't have enough to charge him with anything.
Whoa.
And he, and then a few years later, he beats up that other girl to death in his hotel room. And I think he's serving 30 years in prison.
In Holland, right?
I believe he is. I think he's in Peru. That's where he committed the crime.
That's a bit tougher.
Yeah, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
So with the whole Manny McCann thing, I mean, so what about the dogs? I mean, what happened with the dogs? I mean, is that just another emotional thing that we're connecting into, that these dogs, and you see the video on it, the dog starts barking at the rental car and stuff, and it's like a real, moment of, oh, that's what happened to her. Because I remember when I saw that dog barking, it was almost like a light shining down on me. It's like, case closed.
Right. Well, when things like that happen, we tend to, I mean, you want the finality. You want that to be the actual reason, or you go, oh, that's what happened. And yeah, I think that it was something that needed to be looked at. It was something that was interesting, but that to me, that's just one of those things where we're expecting something, and nothing comes out of it.
It's at 9/11. If you look into 9/11, you'll find a lot of reasons to think that our government did it or something.
Sure.
There's, I think it was what's his name, the philosopher, what's his name, the old Jewish guy there, and he's very left wing, but he does a lot of analysis on Palestine and Israel. But he did a whole thing about it. What the hell's his name? He's actually in Massachusetts. He's a linguistics professor, I think, and he did a whole thing about this, where when you do a scientific experiment, all of these things happen that aren't expected, and that was like a microcosm for what happened in 9/11. And when the passports and this found on the street, what the hell's his name? I'm gonna have to look that up, but I remember the passports being found on the street. What are the chances of that, right? Right, and the Massachusetts linguistic. He lives like not far away from here. He's very famous. I've got to look him up here. Oh man, I can't remember his name. But he's like in his 80s. But he did a whole thing about that, and how when you get something like that that's so huge, you will get inconsistencies that people will emotionally attach to. And with the Madeleine McCann case, that's what happened to me. I mean, I went down so many rabbit holes. I didn't go down the Podesta rabbit hole, but I definitely did go down the rabbit hole where the parents maybe over-medicated her, and she stood on the couch and cracked her head off the tile floor, and they covered it up. But then I'm like, well, I mean, 9 people trying to keep a secret successfully.
Well, that's one of those things where, like conspiracy theories, with like 9/11, you go, no, that many people are going to keep, quiet about something.
Yeah.
I don't see a situation with Maddie as to where her parents were, drugging her, or now if this was Casey Anthony, I think that's exactly what happened.
Right. So these parents were basically naive, middle class. Middle class in Britain is better than middle class here. They've got more wealth. So they basically went there, and they're so naive and middle class, and they've never really had to deal with like anything like that, and they thought everything was fine. That was it.
Yeah, and unfortunately for everybody, there was a monster lurking and in that area. And like I said, it's a culmination of a perfect storm. You know, negligence on the parents' part, leaving their children alone, which you know, you would think that two doctors would have a bit more sense than that, but you know,
that's the thing.
And yeah, look, man, everybody should be looked at. The problem is there was just nothing to substantiate those claims.
They didn't help themselves either. Where the media is concerned, I mean, that book she wrote, and she talked about Madeleine's private parts being like all that stuff, and it was like they didn't look good. And I think it was a class thing as well, because, you know, doctor is a very, very highly esteemed job in Britain. So people were saying if that had been like a couple of working class people, they would have gotten like put through the ringer. But they were, so there was a lot of that too. And the media jumped on that and really exploited it. Much like the Amanda Knox case, it was a kind of a real media kind of like a frenzy almost.
Yeah, it totally. Once the media kind of picks up on that kind of stuff, it goes from 0 to 100 and no signs of slowing down. All these cases that are big, like Casey Anthony, Madeleine McCann, Amanda Knox. The media plays a huge part in the stories, because I mean, you had people outside of Casey Anthony's parents' house holding up signs saying, you know, you're harboring a baby killer. And look, whatever you think of Casey Anthony or people like that, at the end of the day, that's their daughter. And their only hope to get Kaylee back was to try to play ball with this crazy bitch. And, you know, in hindsight, everything is much more clear, you know? So, like you said, you fall into these rabbit holes. And I've done the same thing with many things, but, when it kind of comes down to facts, I like the presentation of Christian Bruckner over anything else I've ever heard, and it's not close. Now, could I be wrong? Of course. Could the German authorities be wrong? Of course. But everybody else has been wrong too, you know. So I think they've got their guy. I think that they're building their case, and they're in no hurry because he's not out there. But look, if he was out running free, they would probably try to charge him right now.
Right, with what they had.
Get him off the street because he's dangerous. Whether he killed Maddie or not, he was dangerous before that. He was dangerous after that. His rap sheet is, you know, it goes horrific. On for a long time, you know, and he's no stranger to absolute heinous crimes. And one of the most heinous crimes that you can commit is kidnapping, raping, and killing a child. It gets no worse. There's levels to it, and that's as bad as it gets.
Yeah, now I asked you about this before, but there was a I can't remember the details, but a woman came home and he was standing. Could she identify him? There was a woman that came home and he was in the apartment, or she woke up and found him in the apartment going after her daughter.
Yeah.
Was that? Could she identify him? What was the deal with that?
No, I'm not really all that privy of, but no, she was never able to identify who she thinks that she saw, and I think she, just like a lot of people, she thought she was probably doing the right thing by reporting what she thought that she saw. But once again, it hit a dead end, and nothing could have nothing came out of that, with that. But once again, it's all those things. When these things come up one by one, and then you look back on them, you go, oh, I can't, that didn't make. But when they come up in front of you while the case is going, you go, oh, that needs to be looked at. And then that's the piece of information you get to chew on for 2 or 3 months until something else comes up. So I get why they need to look at those situations. I get the dogs, her identifying this person, but none of it ever pans out. That's the big issue, and I believe that the Madeleine McCann story will eventually be solved, and hopefully not in the too far future. I'm very interested to see what they dig up here at this new compound in Portugal.
That's awesome, man. You've been doing your DD on this. Where do you go for sources? Is this just like mainstream media, or do you have an actual source you go to find? Because that stuff doesn't come up in my YouTube feed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I have a couple people that I work with who, we research, and a lot of the stuff, like you said, if you type it in, it's not going to come right up. You have to go find public domain. His German rap sheet, I've read that. I've read his journal. I don't speak German, but my uncle does, and he helped me translate a lot of this stuff. And so, yeah, I usually, what I usually do is I go to the official documents of the case first, whatever's public knowledge, because you can really get down to the nitty gritty when it comes to like the court documents, and then I kind of work from inside out on that. Real quick, and I don't know if we'll have time to cover it tonight, but we can always do another one. Like the whole with Damien Eccles.
Oh, let's do it. That case is unbelievable.
There's there is a compiled mental history of Damien Eccles.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just introduce this first if we're going to go into this.
Sure.
If we got to leave the Madeleine McCann thing for now and see what transpires. But Damien Eccles and his two buddies were accused of murdering 3 little boys 8-year-olds, right? In West Memphis, Arkansas in
1993, May 5th, 1993.
Right.
And basically what happens is May 5th, 1993, 3 little boys, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch, go missing in West Memphis, Arkansas. And immediately the parents are out searching for the kids. They end up searching into the night till about 2 or 3 in the morning. There's no sign of the kids, and what ends up happening after that is the next day the police are now involved. There's a massive search going on, and there's this place called Robin Hood Hills, and it's kind of just a green belt right off the highway there. There's a truck stop.
Like right, a little macro forest kind of a thing.
Yeah, basically. And then, so on the other side of that is the interstate. So it's kind of a loud spot, but it's secluded. And they're searching in there, and there's one of the West Memphis police detectives or one of the searchers. What he does is they're walking on this in Robin Hood Hills in this creek bed, and they look down and he sees a shoe, floating. So he goes to get it and falls in. When he falls in, he bumps something below him. Well, it was Michael Moore, who was pinned down in the water with sticks, naked. He floats up to the top, and this detective sees this and goes, "Oh my God, like, we're in the right spot." They had also noticed that when they looked, everything else looked, just foresty, and where they were, the hill that led down into it was all slicked over, like somebody had been throwing water up there to wash stuff away. Like it was just like a slicked over mud pile, basically. And a few meters up the stream, you have the two other boys, and they're both pinned down same way. Their hands are tied, feet to wrist. One of the boys is castrated. There's knife wounds on, or what appears to be knife wounds on one of the boys' face, and they're all three dead. And so, obviously, this is a horrific scene. And all of a sudden, there is this massive investigation that is launched. Now, if you've seen Paradise Lost, they would have you believe that Damien, Jason, and Jesse were picked on by the police, that they were zeroed in immediately. Now, the fact is, they searched. They were looking. They pulled fuel logs for truckers. That's the first thing they did. They were looking at truckers. Then they looked at transients. Then they looked at Vietnam vets. Then they looked at all the pedophiles that were around West Memphis, which there was no shortage of, by the way. And they bring in the state police, the local police, the FBI. So this notion that Damien Eccles that these three boys were singled out immediately, well, that's just not the case. Now, was Damien on their radar at some point? Definitely. Damien had a very strange history. Now, I get that having a strange history doesn't convict you of a crime, but FBI people or FBI profilers really like to put together these kind of profiles, especially sadistic, mentally ill type people. Damien went to a mental institution, 3 mental institutions in a span of 2 months. His parents admitted him. They were scared that he was into satanic worship, and he had threatened to kill, I believe it was slit his mother's throat and eat his father. He had threatened them, and they were like, you know what, this is too much. They had him committed. And so when they're going through people, they're saying, well, Damien, let's give him, they come up with this questionnaire from the FBI, and what it is it's just a profile thing. So they had Damien fill one of these out, along with many other suspects. There were a lot of them. Damien's was the only one that came back and they're going, what in the hell? He answers these questions in such an incriminating way. He starts blabbing about black magic. He starts blabbing about sacrificing people and how people would, whoever did this must have loved it, loved hearing the screaming of the kids. So then, any investigator is going to go, did you hear what he said? And so, you kind of fast forward, and they get to, the whole controversy with Jesse Miskelly. Jesse Miskelly was brought in for questioning by police because he knew Damien. They did not consider Jesse a suspect. That's not why they brought him in. They brought him in to talk about his relationship with Damien because, they were kind of circling the wagon on Damien. They wanted to know more about it. So there's this big false narrative that he was interrogated for 12 hours, and nothing could be further from the truth. They picked him up around 10 o'clock in the morning. They were looking for Jesse. They couldn't find him. They went by his dad's shop and said, you know, we want to talk to Jesse. The dad says, well, I know where he is. He's sleeping at this lady's house. He stayed the night with her. So they go over there, they pick him up, they bring him in. They're doing paperwork. And for, you know, about an hour or so, you know, they're filling out paperwork. They're not really talking to him about anything. However, what ends up happening from there is he's saying, yeah, I was at home. I was doing this. I was doing that. And they said, well, would you take a lie detector? So he says, sure. So he takes a lie detector test. He fails the lie detector test. They come back and they say, look, this kid's full of shit. He's lying. They confront him with that. And then he basically, even before this, he's talking about how weird of a person Damien was, how he is a sicko, you know, all this stuff, because they were asking about his relationship with Damien. And come to find out, after he fails his lie detector test, they tell him, you failed. And then he starts to give bits and pieces of information. Now, the West Memphis 3 supporters would have you believe that this was a coerced confession. Right. And in my you know, experience with these kind of cases, that's really all you got working for you when somebody confesses. You're going to have to say it's coerced if you're trying to get off, right? And so they go, well, you know, but here's the problem with that. They interviewed over 100 people before they got to Jesse. Jesse tells them certain aspects of the case that only the killer would know. And the problem is that Jesse, he intentionally throws off the time. He's trying not to implicate himself in this crime that, hey, I was just there. I saw what they were doing. And then he starts saying, well, you know, it was at like 9 a.m. They go, well, that 9 a.m, the kids were in school and they knew that. So then what happens is West Memphis 3 supporters go, he got the time wrong. It's a totally false confession. Well, come on. I mean, he says, and this is where he really sunk his own ship, was that he said that one of the boys, which was, I believe it was Michael Moore, was wearing a Cub Scout outfit, takes off running, scared. Jesse admits to going chasing him down and bringing him back. Okay. So right there, he's implicated himself in the crime. He's implicated Jason as being there and the one with the knife cutting on the side of one of the boys' face. And then you have Damien, who is implicated by Jesse as well. And so, you know, they have to go before the court to get an arrest warrant. They feel like they have enough with this confession to go and get these 3 and arrest them. So they do. And immediately they're denying it. But before he gets arrested, Damien is in the police state, the West Memphis Police Department. He's giving these crazy statements. I mean, just something you would never do if you were an innocent person. He starts talking about Satanism and ritualistic, cults and how whoever did this must have loved it and just weird answers, you know, and you're kind of going, why would you answer like that?
And these are the standardized questions that the FBI ask for profiling, right? There's like 80 or something of them.
Yeah, and they asked a ton of people these same questions, right. And he's the only one that answered them like this. So anyway, what happens is they say, will you take a lie detector? He says, sure. He fails. So then he says, look, he says he wants to see his mother. They say, okay. He says, I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you everything. I just want to see my mom. So they go get his mother. She recently, Pam, I believe her name was Pam, just recently passed away, actually. And they go get her. She comes into the police station, and all of a sudden the interview's over. He's not talking anymore, and they walk out of there, right? Because I would imagine the conversation went, you're going to what? Like your life's over, basically. Shut up. Don't say a word. And I don't know. Look, there's so many things about his mother that you can even talk about. What even she found him odd. She had him committed, for God's sakes. You know, I mean, so Damien then he goes on. He's at a softball game. Some girls. This is actually in Paradise Lost. That some girls overhear him saying that he killed the 3 boys and that he was going to kill 2 more and then turn himself in. Now, none of that ever happened because he got arrested. They arrest the 3 boys. They charge them all with capital murder. Damien is the alleged ringleader.
He gets a death sentence, right?
Yeah. So here's where it's really weird because they had to do 2 separate trials. Jesse confessed. So they have to try him separately. Right. And they do. But Jesse refuses to take the stand in Jason and Damien's trial for whatever reason, mostly because he was at that point was saying, well, you know, I didn't do it. I was coerced, even though there's multiple confessions, even after he is convicted. I mean, we're talking at least 7 confession, full confession.
And details that he wouldn't have known.
Right.
I can't remember what the details are, but he said some things that he could not have known if he wasn't there.
So he told him exactly where it happened. He described what they did to the boys, which was consistent with the injuries. He even describes a stick that Damien had where he kind of peeled back the bark of the stick, which was how those sticks that were holding the kids down in the water were. He said he had the correct boy that was castrated. He had the correct boy who had the knife wounds on the side of his face. He had a lot of, he got most things right. It wasn't a perfect confession, but it was solid. I mean, but that's really typical with people when they confess to a crime that other people are involved in. They try and make the other person's involvement much more, graphic than their own. He's like, I didn't do this. I just watched. Well,
I just chased the kid down and they did all the other stuff.
Yeah. And Jesse, I don't think Jesse had any real intentions of wanting to kill those kids. He was down to beat the shit out of them. Jesse was on probation for beating up hitting an 8-year-old girl with a rock. Just 2 months before that, he had no problem beating up kids. But he basically had a mental breakdown because of this. So what ends up happening from there is they try Jesse. They use his confession against him, obviously. He's found guilty, sentenced to life plus 40 years. Okay. They say he's mentally retarded. That was their defense. He confessed he's mentally retarded. The whole Brendan Dassey thing.
Yeah.
Jesse wasn't mentally retarded, but he wasn't smart by any stretch of the imagination. He could read, he could write, he could count. He could do all that stuff.
He got an IQ of 70 something, or was it? I can't remember.
That's what they say, but it was probably higher than that. I mean, he'd be the dumbest kid in any class. There's no doubt about that. But he's not mentally retarded. That's what they said. It's just it's something they say. Oh well, he's slow. I don't even think he's slow. He's he's simple. That's all it is.
Right.
He's not dumb enough to confess to a crime that he didn't commit. And he corrects investigators during those interrogations, right? So what ends up happening from there is he refuses to testify in the case of Jason and Jesse. The weakest case that so they're standing trial together, but they're being tried separately still. Okay. So they could find Jason innocent and Damien guilty. Because they have two different lawyers. They have it's one trial, but they're trying two different people. And the evidence against Damien is strong. The evidence against Jason Baldwin is not very strong. Because they can't use the confession of Jesse in this trial. They have to try them on the evidence that they have. And the evidence that they have against Damien was that, by the way, you won't find this in any of the Paradise Lost. So there's 4 or 5 major documentaries about this. Not one of them brings any of this up. They don't talk about Damien's mental health issues. Of course, that doesn't mean he's guilty of anything other than having mental health problems. Damien was known to drink the blood of other people's cuts in the mental institutions.
Didn't he stomp like a Labrador to death or something?
He did. It was a Great Dane, and which was corroborated by Jason Baldwin's cousin. Told police on record that he saw Damien. He watched him do it. It was a old sickly Great Dane. He smashed his head in with a rock, gutted it, was playing with the intestines, and left to go get some battery acid because he wanted to keep the skull of the Great Dane. And so,
wow.
Yeah. So what ends up happening, the evidence against him and all that, none of that is in trial evidence, but here's where the evidence gets bad for all of them. Their alibis they don't exist. They try to I don't know exactly why they did this, but Jesse tried to say that he had an alibi, 2 alibis. Neither one of them stood up in court. They got ripped apart. Damien's defense never even brings up an alibi because he doesn't have one. They're saying they're basically saying, if this is the alibi that you're going to give us, Damien, we can't bring this to court. So they don't ever even try to give him an alibi. He says that he was on the phone with 3 or 4 different girls at the time.
Right.
Now, we know that's not true because all 4 of those girls say that they spoke with him around 4:30 and then again around 10 o'clock that night. The crimes happened between 6 and 8. Okay. Damien, by 2 people testifying in court. Have you ever heard of the Hollingsworth clan?
The name rings a bell.
So Damien has this girlfriend named Dominique.
Yes. Yeah. Now that you mention it. Yeah.
Well, in court, they testify that they see Damien and they're not sure if it's Jason or Dominique, but they know it's Damien for certain, leaving the service road by Robin Hood Pills. He's leaving the scene of the crime at the time covered in mud. What's he doing over there? Why is he over there? Where's his alibi? So he doesn't have an alibi. He's spotted at the scene of the crime. He gives insane statements to the FBI. He does he's into sacrificing ritualistic killings, animals. He was a known animal abuser. He killed cats. He shoved firecrackers up their ass. He abused he would file his nails to a point, grow them out about an inch, and attack people with them. He set a school on fire a couple times. He was suspended. There's just so many things that he has done over the years, which would put him on anybody's radar. Okay. Now, what ends up happening from there is you have people testifying that they saw Damien leaving the scene of the crime. He has no alibi. And now the circumstantial evidence is what's big in this case. It's all about the totality. There was not a lot of forensic evidence. There was some fiber transfer, or there was some green fiber transfers that were consistent with clothes in the suspect's house. There was blue candle wax that was found on the some of the boys' clothes. And it just so happened that Damien and Dominique and they had the consistent same kind of blue candle. They brought a candle to the killing is what they did. Right. And so, they find this candle that matches the wax that was on the clothes of the kids. Now the blood had been washed away. They did test it for luminol or they did test it with luminol, and there was blood all over. But it couldn't be used because it was just, there was nothing, you can't scrape blood up from.
Was that what they washed the bank with?
Well, what they washed the bank with is they took the water and they splashed it up. Yeah. Like they were trying to clean the crime scene is basically what they were trying to do. And then what sinks Damien's ship is the fact that he was spotted at the crime scene or leaving the crime scene. He has no alibi. He gets up on the stand and lies, talking about how he's not into Aleister Crowley, how he's not into, but then they go, well, what about, you've been in jail this whole time. I got some of your writings right here. Aleister Crowley's name is on a list of, you wrote down. And if you know anything about Aleister Crowley, I mean,
I know him well.
The Mega B666.
Yeah.
I mean, Aleister Crowley was a sick, perverted human, and Damien's to this day talks about it. To this day.
I think he's still in the, I don't want to talk too much about it because I was involved in it at one point, but not to that extent. But yeah, I know a lot about Aleister Crowley. And some people say that, he's just misunderstood and demonized by Western society. For me, the jury's out on that. But where Damien Echols is concerned, he still talks about it on Twitter to this day.
Well, yeah, Aleister Crowley, Anton LaVey, all those kind of guys. He loves all that's his thing. He's into those kind of people, and he still is. He's still practicing magic, and he spells it with the K. And
yeah.
And but what got him convicted was his own statements, him being seen at the scene of the crime, no alibi. That was huge for the jury. And here's how Jason gets convicted. There's a boy in prison named Michael Carson. And Michael Carson and Jason are, together. And he asked him, "Did you do it?" He says, "Yes." Or no, at first he said no. And then he asked him again later on. And then he said he went into detail about what he did. Now, Michael Carson was in there for burglary, and maybe his credibility was low. He passed 2 lie detector tests, and has never recanted that story. That's a confession. Okay. That is a confession to a crime, and like it or not, that's all you need to convict somebody. Now, but the jury has to find him credible, and they did. Now, is that enough to convict somebody? By our standards, by our laws, yes. Is his case the weakest out of all of them? Yes. Jason refused to take a lie detector test. Jason didn't take the stand in his trial. Smart move. He had a pretty good lawyer. And what ends up happening is that they're all found guilty. Jason gets life sentence, Damien's sentenced to death, and what everybody points to is, well, why are they out of prison? Why are they out of prison?
Pearl Jam, Johnny Depp.
Yeah, there's a man by the name of Scott Ellington. He was the head of prosecutor and in West Memphis. Guy's getting ready to run for Congress, and back in 2011, they're saying, "Hey, we have some new information that we'd like to present to you." And the state of Arkansas basically bends over backwards saying, okay, so they come up with new legislation, new evidentiary hearings, just in case they got something wrong, right? So they say, we'll give you guys a new evidentiary hearing. And then Damien's defense team says, well, how about an Alford plea? And if you know what an Alford plea is, you're basically saying they have enough to convict me. They have enough evidence to convict me, but I can still maintain my innocence, but I'm pleading guilty.
Right.
We'll let you. So Scott Ellington, who's facing this huge pressure of, the media, like you said, Johnny Depp, Dixie Chicks, HBO, the producers, Paradise Lost producers, things like that. He doesn't want anything to do with this case anymore. It's been 18 years, and he agrees to the Alford plea, which released them as convicted killers, child killers. They're pleading guilty. They're maintaining their innocence. Jason says he doesn't want to take it, but he'll do it for Damien because they're going to kill Damien. Jason said, "Oh, I want to fight for my, my innocence." The problem was they had a defense fund for about $20 million, and they had all the experts at their disposal, and not one shred of evidence that they could never produce a shred of evidence that implicated anybody else. Okay. So the fact that people say, well, they were scared that they were going to lose the retrial. No, they offered them a new evidentiary hearing and to see, okay, well, what is your new evidence? These boys are either the unluckiest people in the world or and there's this grand conspiracy that goes all the way up to the Arkansas Supreme Court because their convictions were held up time after time after time. Okay. And Scott Ellington undoes it all with a stroke of the pen because he doesn't give a shit about this case. He's tired of the media pressure. He wants to run for Congress, and he does not want these guys getting a new trial while he's running for Congress. Okay. Come to find out, Scott Ellington was never elected. He doesn't even work there anymore. I mean, he is such a coward when it came to he bailed, and it's really unfortunate that people say, well, they wouldn't be out of prison if they were guilty. Well, that goes against everything that the Alford plea is used for. I get the optics of it. If you don't know the case, you would think that maybe, they basically say that they're innocent, that they're exonerated. That's what they want people to believe. Fact is that they've been convicted twice of this crime. And
at the start and then the Alford plea.
Yeah, they got at the trials, they were all convicted. Then the Alford plea, they admit their guilt, they sign the deal. And look, if I was in their situation, if I was Damien, I'd take that deal too. They don't have anything. They don't have any new evidence. That's why they took the Alford plea. But they kept screaming, "Oh, we have all this new evidence. That's something that's been said for the last 10 years. There's no new evidence." And DNA was really in its infancy back in 93. So the claim that there was no evidence against them is false. The claim that they were picked on because they were outcast, they wore black and Metallica shirts, that's false. The fact is that all the evidence pointed to three of them. And first of all, and let me just say this, I have no problem if people want to say, you know what, the evidence, there's stuff there, but I don't think that was enough to convict him. Fair enough. Okay, fine. I believe you're wrong if you feel that way, but I don't like even talking about Terry Hobbs because it's such a bullshit story, man. I get it. Like there was they found a little hair in the ligature of one of the boys. That was his stepson. He lived with him. Cornell, I'm sure you and your audience, if we went through your clothes, we'd find your children's hair, your wife's hair. We'd find it on them. They'd find it on you. That is easily explained away. But I'll tell you one thing, and I'll tell you, I'll leave it here. His story, Damien's story, is a scary, tragic. When he was a child, I could see feeling bad for him. But after right before closing arguments, they find this pendant, Damien's pendant. They find blood flakes on the pendant. And they sent it off for testing. It comes back that there is DNA. The DNA that was on that, the blood type matched the blood type. It's not his blood by conclusion, but it matches the blood type of Stevie Branch. Why does Damien have blood on his necklace at all? So they find his blood on there, or they find his
blood type.
They find his blood type. They find Stevie Branch's blood type. Now they were this almost had because of this, they almost had to do a retrial because closing arguments, they didn't even present this into evidence. Okay. Because they had already rested their case. And they said, well, we don't even need this piece of evidence. And they didn't, and they got the conviction anyway. But let me just ask you this. I don't know if you own any jewelry or anything like that. Do you wear a watch?
No, nothing.
All right, so I have on a watch right here, and sometimes I wear a necklace. if anybody's blood is found on my necklace, that's not mine. That's odd. But not only did they find inconsistent blood that wasn't his, they found the blood type of a boy he's accused of murdering on his necklace. Now, does that prove that he killed him? No. But I would like somebody to give me a good answer as to why. Try and explain that. Because I can explain Terry Hobbs' hair. I can explain that. I cannot explain why Damien has that on his pendant.
No, it wasn't the whole deal with Terry Hobbs' hair. Wasn't it found in the ligatures? Is what you call it? Wasn't it in where it was tied?
Yeah,
it was lodged in between the shoelaces.
Yeah, and by the way, it wasn't necessarily Terry Hobbs' hair. It was mitochondrial DNA. There was no root. Okay, so that it's linear DNA. It matches dozens of people in West Memphis. You know,
right?
Was it Terry's hair? Probably, but I mean, it's the same thing as blood types. You know, it's not conclusive, and the FBI and the West Memphis police, like they were like, yeah, so what? You know, like secondary transfer happens. Those kids, all three of them, one of the boys lived with Terry Hobbs because it was his stepson, and then the other two were over at his house all the time because they were all buddies. But Damien never knew these kids, but yet has the blood type of one of the boys on his necklace. You know, and the thing that people hit me up with a lot is, you know, a lot of this is hearsay. A lot of this is that, you know, look, it's the totality of the evidence. When you can take multiple pieces and add them up, stack them up one by one by one by one by one, everything points in one direction. And it is, unfortunately, the problem is that those three little boys know exactly who killed them. They're not allowed. They can't tell the story because they're dead. And all the evidence points to these three guys who are now out. Damien makes a living on Patreon. And he practices magic as a 46-year-old man who has no care about finding out who really killed those kids. Like he said that we can start our research from the outside, and they haven't done a damn thing to try and change that. And they never will, you know? So, you know, and look, there's so many things that I could expand on with them. My voice is going out, and and you know, there's many other factors that we could talk about, but I'm running out of steam here. So
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot more to talk about, and it's been fascinating. You've brought up a lot of stuff that I didn't really know. You know, like most people that, you know, look into this, I'm kind of like, you're an expert on it, and it's impressive. I didn't, well, especially with the Madeleine McCann case as well. There's a lot of stuff that I just thought that Christian was some kind of a red herring, and I kind of had I'm with you on the West Memphis 3 of you know, it's like Occam's razor, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's publicly, it's a look. I get more feedback saying, yeah, they're guilty but the people that defend them, they're rough. I mean, they can be brutal. They don't want to have an actual debate. They just want to say that you're small-minded and that you're unintelligent and that you're not privy to the facts. And the one thing that I am privy to is the facts. I've read the trial transcripts. I've watched the trial. I've read Exhibit 500. I've been on this case for 10 years. Now, when my knowledge of the case went up astronomically when I met Gary Meese. Now, Gary, if you think that I'm knowledgeable, an expert on this case, Gary knows everything.
I got to get him on here.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, he is fantastic and such a nice guy. And like I said, to your listeners out there, I do want to say that if you are interested, you can buy a copy of Terry's book on Amazon. It's reasonably priced for like $10-11. It's called The Case Against the West Memphis 3. And if you read that book, you're going to go, wow, holy shit, Yeah. And Gary and I have formed a friendship over the year, or I say over the years, over the last year. And we both have a passion for wanting to tell the little boy's story, because the truth isn't really out there. Like I told you before, we were talking off screen when I said that reality is not as fun as a fictional, Hollywood story. And that's what Paradise Lost was. They omitted many things. And it's lying by omission. Like when you leave stuff out like that, don't you think that people would want to hear about the eyewitnesses that put Damien at the scene of the crime? Don't you think people want to hear that Damien had been put in a mental institution 3 times in 2 months and threatened to kill his wife? Don't you think that you'd want to hear that Dominique herself said that Damien said he wanted to sacrifice his first child?
Yeah.
No, I mean, you guys leave that stuff out. Why? Let people make up their mind with the actual facts.
It's like the Avery documentaries too. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Why wouldn't they just kill Stephen Avery? Instead, why kill Teresa Hallback? Why?
No, I do think that now. One thing before we get off, I do think the cops planted the key because they wanted to get a solid conviction.
Look, man, I don't.
But I think he's guilty, but I think that they probably were like, let's make it rock solid.
Yeah, but you would also have to assume that the sheriff's department cared that Stephen Avery was going to win a lawsuit. That's not their money. Why would they care?
True.
So, and then wouldn't it be much easier, instead of killing some poor innocent woman, to just somehow kill Steve Avery?
Yeah, true.
It would be much easier to.
That'll be the title of the next podcast: Kill Steve Avery.
I mean, that would have made a lot more sense, right? I mean,
exactly.
Well, Teresa Hallback, like, so you saying that the sheriff's department purposely sought out somebody on his property? We're going to kill this girl, so the state doesn't have to pay. This is taxpayer money that's going to pay him.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit. They're not getting fired.
And just make it look like a car accident. Yeah, I get you.
It begs belief, and they try to make it seem. Look, I do have a problem, and we could talk about this another time, but I do have a problem with Brendan's confession.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like Jesse's, by the way. It's not. I didn't like the way that they did it with him. It was not good. Yeah. And it gives police interrogations a bad name. I totally get it. I still think he's guilty, but the way that they did it, I wasn't a fan of that. And I think that boy got suckered into something by his uncle and went along with a shitty thing and was just a 16-year-old boy. But Stephen Avery had many issues prior to being put in prison. Think about that, being put in prison, like falsely accused of something, being exonerated 20 years later, and then going to kill somebody again. Like, Jesus, he's another animal abuser.
Right.
And
killed a cat.
Yeah, and he exposed himself to women all the time, and he threw a cat in a fire.
Yeah,
like a fire pit.
Do you ever hear the case of one of my favorite interviews ever on Confessions was the Canadian Colonel? Do you remember him?
I don't. No, I'm not familiar with that.
Colonel Williams, was it? Oh my God, what's his name? He was the one that was breaking into women's houses and staying in their underwear and like taking photographs of himself. Russell Williams.
No, I'll take a look at that.
Fascinating case.
Yeah,
he was like a lieutenant in the Canadian Air Force or something. I mean, he flew the Queen from England to Canada and stuff. Colonel Russell Williams. They called him Colonel Mustard because he signed his. He tried to commit suicide, and he used mustard to like write a suicide note on the wall of his jail cell. It's crazy story. Anyway, Josh,
I want to just like to thank you for having me on. I truly, I've had a great time and a pleasure.
Oh, so much fun.
Yeah, and we'll do it again, and we can. I can expand on even more West Memphis stuff because there's a lot there. And, I kind of just gave you the basic summary of why, how the story started and stuff. But thank you for having me on. I truly do appreciate it, man.
Oh, it's fantastic. Thanks very much, Josh, for joining me.
Yes, we will do it again. Thanks, guys.
All right. Talk to you soon, Josh.
Bye-bye.
Bye.